Artur, it's so nice to talk to you. So far away. How many kilometers far away? in India.
Yeah, nice to
In India, United States. Tell us a little bit how you feel the situation right now.
yeah. For those of us who are not part of the CDC, which is the institution that takes care of pandemics here, this has been a surprise. It was not a surprise for them. However, for regular citizens like us, this has been quite a shock. I'm a professor at the Racklin School of the Arts at Indiana University in South Bend. Sorry, the long title. And we were very aware of the virus as it began to spread through the news here, and the school took quick action to postpone the spring break, the break that happens. It's about a week long, uh, and so they increased the spring break by another week, and at that point they canceled all of the classes in-person classes at the university. So, um, you know, everything is different. Everything seems a little off. Everything seems a little challenging. We had to learn how to deal with how to teach online,
Yeah.
which the vast majority of us didn't know how to or never had done. And on top of that, many questions arise, like how do we teach art
Yeah.
online?
It's
It's not a text that you send and or a mathematical equation that can be done. It has always been a practice, as even the art that we know in art history, for instance, which is a history of European art primarily. That's how it started. uh, you know uh, People learn about art in studios as apprentices until art schools were formed later. That's how people learned about art, by watching, by reproducing, by creating with a master or somebody qualified to teach them. And so imagine that this has been a situation that we're all sort of learning how to deal with it as it goes, as everyone else, as every other profession has. This is not a privilege of us educators or artists.
Yeah, but where the zone where you live, it's not so affected by the COVID-19. No, it's not like New York. You don't have so many cases, no?
Yeah, New York is the epicenter of the, perhaps right now, of the world. Imagine that, living in close proximity with people, riding subways. New York is a crowded place. New York is also a bit of a chaotic place. How do you tell a family of 5 or 6 that suddenly they have to stay inside of a small apartment in New York City? It's not the same for me, who live in a one bedroom that is quite large here where I am. It's much more comfortable, it's much more doable, so it's easier for me than it is for, say, a middle class family in New York. So, I mean, so yes, here it's not quite as bad. And we have these bubbles. I mean, we ride around in cars, and everything we do is sort of, you know, um, comprised of, we coming and going from places, and we're not in contact with many people, so it doesn't spread the same way. Also, the density of a small town is much less than a big city.
Yeah, but what did they tell you? How is going to be the next term at university? When will you return to the normal classes? Did they tell you anything? Because I guess that it will be the same like in Spain and Germany, that there will be phases for every state. No, you can open up as you want.
Yeah, here is also what they're calling a new normal, which is an increased approach of opening these spaces. different categories of businesses and different dates and so on. So we scheduled to reopen partially on May 15th, where I am. But it will likely, because here in this particular county, it closed later than in Indianapolis, which is the capital of the state where I am, then it will also reopen a little bit later. Um, yes, I mean, I'm sorry, what was the question again?
Now, when you will go back to university? I mean,
Yeah.
when will the normal situation become real for you?
Yeah. So what I was saying, it was about other businesses that are placed in different categories and different dates for them to reopen under different circumstances. For us teaching, the universities still don't know if there will be in-person classes in the fall. So imagine that this could be almost a full year of no classes in person. And perhaps more. But the information we have so far is that they're considering a number of scenarios, including, but not limited to, in-person, a combination of in-person and online classes. So there's that. We could be teaching in a new way, starting in the fall of 2020, which would be, part of the classes, and different subjects is being dealt differently also. I can only hope that art they would at least allow us to do lectures in person and critiques. Those are very hard to do from a distance. It's very cold.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine what kind of art that will emerge out of the situation. Nobody knows, but it is shaping a generation of people that have never faced anything like that. And so yeah, it's interesting to live through this and see what steps the leaderships of various organizations and the country take.
And how do you deal with the isolation? How can you cope with it?
Yeah,
Because
it's
it's not necessary, your isolation, because it's not such a threat in your state.
yeah. I mean, it is. It's not like Spain right now that they have a very controlled situation. Here's the opposite. You have people protesting on the streets. Not here where I am, but a couple of weeks ago, for instance, I was in Indianapolis, and there was a large protest, hundreds of people outside of the governor's house, with machine guns in their hands, which is something unimaginable in Europe, really. But in the United States, people have machine guns in their homes. And some of these folks, this is, again, it's important to make that distinction. These are not just conservative people, these are far right wing, which is the base of Donald Trump. And these people were protesting the reopening. They wanted to reopen. They were wearing masks, but they wanted the business to come back to reopen. So imagine how different it is from the situation in Madrid, say, where you have, checkpoints where the police stop you and want to know what you're doing and where you're going. Here is not like that. So it's just if there is a lot of people congregating, there are phone numbers that you can call, and they might come over and encourage everybody to leave. In other places like New York, the NYPD, has not missed a chance to abuse its power, and there are videos of them attacking people on the streets. But that's part of another large issue here in the United States that that precedes the pandemic. Here, it's less of a chance that one would be contaminated, but these guidelines are important. We don't want we don't want this to flare back up, and We want the numbers to go down and the hospitals to be able to support the patients. So right now, that's the situation here.
Are you afraid of your own professional future?
You know, being a person that survived the 2008-9 market crash, uh, being solely an artist at the time, yes, I'm very concerned about, you know, what will happen to the visual arts in terms of, you know, in relationship to what's going to happen politically, economically. Imagine that in the first 7 weeks here in the United States, 35 million people have applied for unemployment. 35 million people have lost their jobs. About 70% of the restaurants are predicted to close permanently. 70, 70.
Yeah.
It's not a very promising situation. No matter how I look at it, I
Yeah.
can't see a very positive outcome to this, partially due to the mismanagement of this administration. You know, imagine out of the $2 trillion that were um, uh, uh, done in projects that were done by the government, by Congress and the Senate, uh, only a portion of that is coming directly to people. That means that we haven't really learned anything about these dynamics. In 2008 and 9, the bailouts were to the institutions that caused the crash of the economy. So, you know, a fraction of that, even with a country of 300 million people, this $1,200 is only a fraction of this massive $2 trillion bailout for large corporations. And, you know, the money that was put for small businesses, which is the majority of businesses in this country, for them to keep paying employees so people are employed, corporations that have multiple locations applied for, you know, $10 million in some of them. So that's a rough thing to witness. It shows that we haven't really learned much about these times of crisis. You know, the one positive thing that I think can happen out of this is that people are at home and they have a better opportunity of to envision a world that they want to live in. You know, there's a chance for that. I'm not saying that that will happen, but there's a chance that people spending more time with themselves, they can get to a realization that the world doesn't really need to be the way it is now, in which these corporations essentially, you know, control how the laws are made here in the United States. Some of the bills that get to Congress, they go in with the corporation's name on the header, because you know lobbyists have presented these bills to Congress, and so you know there's an opportunity there to envision a new future. Not sure it will happen, but it's at least an opportunity for that now that people don't have to work as hard. Another thing that happened is, you know, for everybody else, we realize that the work we do, you know, can only take a few hours a day, not 40 hours a week, as demanded as the law is here for a full-time employment. So, you know, there's several things there, several dynamics that are opportunities for us to realize the grip that capitalism has on our society.
Do you feel? Don't you feel that there is an opportunity as well for your work, for art in general?
Yes, for the creation of art, this is a gold mine of dynamics that if one is only observant enough, they can see all sorts of things that they can articulate into art, for sure. Now, whether this is going to
make money.
Exactly, whether this is going to be a form of art that is sustainable for artists, we don't know. I mean, we don't know what will happen, and maybe a reevaluation of all of these different parts of society. is needed. Now, I mean, yes, people are at home, people are doing things and crafts and art, and but it's very hard when you have bills to pay and you're unemployed. That's the only thing you can think about is the next bill that is going to arrive. So, I wish the world was in a different position in which we could give the entire world a month of vacation, 2 months of vacation to just decompress from everything. Everybody gets paid, nobody loses job. Then we reopen one day and say everybody's back. It's unfortunately not that. And we have very little concrete that we know about the current situation, and the predictions are not amazing. So yes, there is an opportunity there for artists, in terms of material to use. That's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And do you think that Trump is going to survive this coronavirus crisis?
I mean, uh, I refrain to make any predictions because they have all been very wrong in the past. Trump is not a figure that should have been the president. Uh, we are in a democratic system that allows for the president to be elected with 3 million votes less than the other candidate. How does that happen? Is that a representational type of democracy? All of these are questions that we have that weren't answered yet. Um, yes, it's damaging because his campaign thrive on the phony idea that the American economy was uh, thriving, and it was not thriving. It
Yeah.
was a bunch of people underemployed. Yes, unemployment was low because people stopped looking for jobs once they spent years looking for a job and they can't find. The natural thing is to stop looking. So the numbers were all made up, sort of.
Yeah, it's also you don't have unemployment money, you don't have. So why people should register as unemployed?
There is a little bit. There is unemployment here, but it's they require you to look for a job 20 to 30 hours a week. It's just a terrible system altogether.
Yeah.
It's a fraction of what you earned. It's not the full amount. So yeah, 35 million people in 7 weeks have applied for and lost their jobs. That's That's an incredible number. It's more than the Great Depression in the 30s.
It shows the fragility of the system, that especially the American system. It's really I'm an economist. I always thought that it's just the American economy that from one term to the other can grow a 3% and fall 1%. I mean, this is so it's not stable at all, and probably that also reflects in the people in with all the pills they take. They're so nervous, and you seem to be very quiet and cool, and yeah. But the image we have from the movies and everything, that the Americans are always stressed and like running, eating, running.
Yeah, it's an urgency that has been sold to us as a lifestyle. It's the urgency of being productive under a system that all it does is exploit people. Capitalism has not really provided a whole lot of answers. It has provided criticism of other failed systems as well, but the moment that people begin to imagine a new way of living, there's harsh criticism of that. Capitalism has failed us, and what this pandemic has done here is unpack that very clearly. That in a country where the health care system is for profit, can you imagine that? If you land in a hospital, if you fall outside, go unconscious, you're gonna pay $3,000 for the ambulance to carry to the hospital. Getting there, if they give you Tylenol, they're gonna charge you $70 for that Tylenol. All of this is going to add to your bill. The healthcare system here has been made as a for-profit business, not as a system that takes care of people, not as a human right. So we are very behind, and these disruptions, they unpack all of this very, very clearly. It was already very clear for the vast majority of us that can put two and two together and have lived through certain conditions. But it becomes very, very clear for everyone who wants to see the failures of a system that puts profit above people.
Yeah, but then the Democrats, they don't really change the system, no? I mean, Obama
No,
has very charismatic, and he's really a brilliant talker, but yeah, it's not really.
absolutely.
No?
The Democrats are not offering any solution. This is a party that hasn't been the workers' party as it claims to be in decades. I have been in the United States for over 2 decades now. I have seen nothing meaningful in terms of progress happen in the last 20 years, partially because the Republicans are in lockdown once Obama was elected. This is not speculation. This is stuff that's been documented everywhere. Everything, it was decided day one, before the inauguration, that everything he would propose would come with a blockage. And that's exactly what 8 years of Obama did. The only thing that passed was Obamacare without a public option, meaning, it's still a for-profit business. It's not a tax that comes out of your paycheck like it does in Europe. So yes, Obama didn't do, and that was the only positive thing that he attempted to do. Didn't fight for the public option. If you take that out, it's just massive expenditures with military. People are willing here. Food stamps is a program that you get like $190 for one person per month for food in a card. People immediately, when they have to cut costs, they jump to the benefits of the people. Food stamps, Medicaid, Medicare, these are programs for the people. Nobody is willing to criticize the $768 billion that Donald Trump pushed and passed last year for the military.
Yeah,
It takes more than half of the total GDP. So
no,
imagine.
he's such a liar, because he said he would cut it. He would cut the defense budget, and
He created a new department. He
yeah.
created the space uh, program of military space program.
Yeah.
Not only he didn't cut, but he actually added another one other than the Marines, the Navy, the Air Force.
Yeah. And what do you think? Last question. What do you think about Brazil? You have Bolsonaro there, who is very much friend of Trump. How you see the situation there? How are people dealing with the current situation there?
Yeah, there are mass graves being dug up right now in Manaus, Rio de Janeiro, and other parts. The numbers are incredibly low because there's no testing, much like here. So you got to see Bolsonaro as
good sentence you said. It's a very good sentence. It's low because there is no testing. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a point of not testing people, not that there isn't enough to go around. The point is that by testing people, it becomes evident the collapse of the system. In Brazil, this is happening. I mean, Bolsonaro is a person that when he's no longer in government, and there'll be a day that this will happen, and he won't be able to block, change the Minister of Justice and use his executive power to block every investigation of himself and his sons, all of them murderers. When, for one, and this is not like a blank accusation, when Marielle Franco, a politician in Rio, was murdered, the first thing the assassin did, she was murdered on the streets inside of her car, and her driver was also shot just a motorcyclist stopped by and shot him. The first thing that the murderer did was to go to Bolsonaro's house in Rio. Bolsonaro's son, one of the 4 or 5 kids that he has, 3 of them are politicians. The younger one dated the daughter of the murderer. You know, this is Bolsonaro is the head of the mafia in Rio de Janeiro. There's no.
It's the first time that I hear that, because I heard Brazilians saying that he was fighting corruption, that they elected him because he was. Last year I was in San Francisco with my daughter, and a Brazilian taxi driver, he told us that it was not very fond of him, but yeah, he would really fight corruption. And
you know, you should be suspicious of anyone, you know, with a history like Bolsonaro has, 27 years in Congress without passing a single law, several phantom employees, meaning they go there, clock, and split the money with him. If you look at his, how do I know this? And these people don't know that. You know, you should always be suspicious of somebody who is focusing so much on corruption. Once we have 400 years of colonization, mass murders, corruption, etc., happening in just one geographical location. I mean, no, he's one of the worst characters with power in the world right now.
Wow.
He can hold hands with Trump, Duterte, and several others. And I mean, these people need to respond to criminal action, you know, criminal lawsuits after. Right now will be the best time, but it won't happen because they blocked them, just like they did right now. You know, essentially blocked, replaced the head of our federal police. So there will be no investigation in one of his sons. These are the entire family. They're crooks. This is the mafia that rose to power. And then you encounter this people. I know other folks like a taxi driver. You know, these are not people from the elite, and they are reproducing this rhetoric of you know, new politics. This is a rhetoric of the far right. This is not politics as normal. I think the whole world right now is in grave danger.
Yeah, that's not very good news. Tell us at the end of the por favor, how you say in Portuguese. Obrigada.
Obrigado. Yeah.
Please tell us something positive at the end. What could we learn from it? I mean, as a world. I mean, it's nice that there are like initiatives like the Global Citizen Concerts at home, for instance, this kind of thing. I think that's very nice from the artistic point of view.
Yeah. I think people are thinking about new systems. And I have a friend who started a system of trade in her own building. You know, I have flour, which you can't find here in the supermarket anymore. I have flour, but I need toilet paper. Can you exchange a kilo of flour for 2 rolls of toilet paper? And so on. So people are identifying other ways. People perhaps are beginning to understand the lie that they heard their entire lives. Capitalism is the only successful system. People are beginning to discover solidarity. It doesn't have to be Marxism, but solidarity, which precedes Marxism, goes back to the cave times when we killed an elephant. Today, we have to share with our neighbor because we may not kill anything for another 6 months.
Sharing economy.
Exactly. It's not. It's a policy on your future, to be, you know, to use solidarity, to have solidarity with your neighbors and friends. So that's a positive thing to hope that it happens in a mass scale throughout the world.
Okay, thank you very much. We hope that you come to Europe soon to show us your reflection. It will take some time before we can travel again. We can't get into your country, and I don't know if you can come here, to be honest, with the American.
Yeah,
yeah, we hope that you come here and yeah, to Madrid, and you show us your reflection about all this. Thank you very much, Artur. Have a great weekend. Bye bye.
You too. Bye.
Ciao, ciao. Thank you very much. Bye.